If you were a Gen X kid, you probably remember the sound of unlocking your own front door. Not after your parents came home. Before. The hallway was quiet, lights off, no voices from the kitchen, no one asking how your day went or whether homework was finished. Just the small click of the lock, and the understanding that for the next few hours, everything depended on you. For millions of children born between 1965 and 1980, this wasn't unusual. It was childhood. You dropped your backpack near the wall, turned on the television almost immediately, not because there was something important to watch, but because silence felt bigger when you were alone. 4 channels, maybe 5, if reception cooperated, cartoons, reruns, afternoon talk shows meant for adults. The television wasn't entertainment, it was presence. You made your own snack, cereal poured carefully so milk wouldn't spill, toast balanced in unfamiliar hands, maybe something reheated exactly the way you'd seen adults do it. You learned quickly which mistakes burned, and which ones could be cleaned up before anyone noticed. There was no texting a parent, no quick check-in. If something broke, you fixed it. If you were scared, you waited it out. Because nobody was coming home for hours. And environments like that quietly shape a child's psychology. Psychologists describe them as high responsibility, low supervision environments. Kids simply called it normal life. You figured things out. Afternoons stretched endlessly. No scheduled activities filling every hour. No adults organizing play. Just boredom. Real boredom. The kind modern childhood rarely experiences. You read whatever existed nearby. Magazines, instruction manuals, cereal boxes. Some remember reading dictionaries just to discover new words. Others memorized phone numbers out of sheer repetition. You lay on the floor staring at ceilings. Watched dust move through sunlight. Rode bikes without destinations, exploring neighborhoods until street lights flickered on. The universal signal that childhood paused for the night. Nobody tracked you. Parents often had only a vague idea where you'd been all day, and somehow everyone trusted you would return. From today's perspective, it looks like freedom. But freedom at 8 years old often meant responsibility without guidance. Many Gen X kids learned early how to cook simple meals, how to lock doors properly, how to answer the phone politely, how to watch younger siblings while pretending confidence they didn't fully feel. Small adult roles, carried by children. And slowly, something shifted. They began aging internally faster than expected. Generation X didn't just become independent. Many became prematurely mature. While parents worked longer hours, while economic pressure reshaped households, while divorce quietly altered family stability, children adapted. You learned not to panic easily, not to expect constant reassurance, not to assume someone else would step in first, because experience suggested stability could change without warning. Jobs disappeared, families moved, rules changed overnight. So Gen X children developed a quiet survival habit: think ahead, prepare, hope things work out, but plan for when they don't. What later appeared as cynicism was often early pattern recognition. Humor became protection, sarcasm, irony, emotional distance. You joked before situations became uncomfortable, acted unaffected even when things mattered deeply, because caring openly sometimes felt risky, not because emotions were absent, but because disappointment arrived often enough to teach caution. Keeping things light became a way of staying safe. By adolescence, responsibility expanded again. Paper routes before sunrise, bagging groceries after school, working registers where change had to be calculated mentally when machines failed. These jobs weren't symbolic milestones. They carried real consequences. If you didn't show up, people noticed. If you made mistakes, money didn't balance. Competence became security. Being capable meant safety. And that belief followed many Gen X kids into adulthood. Here's the paradox. Gen X rarely asks for help, but they are often the first to help others, because friendships formed differently when parents weren't always available. Friends became support systems, backup families, people who showed up quietly when something went wrong. No announcements, no performance, just reliability. Around the middle of life, many Gen X adults notice something curious. They remain calm in situations that overwhelm others: layoffs, crisis, sudden change. Chaos feels familiar, because uncertainty was never theoretical. It lived inside childhood afternoons where decisions had real consequences. When you learned early that nobody was coming to solve problems, you learned to become the solver. Generation X also developed a unique relationship with privacy. When you embarrassed yourself as a teenager, maybe 10 people knew. And then, life moved on. Mistakes faded. Identity evolved without permanent evidence. So broadcasting life online can feel strangely uncomfortable. Not because technology is confusing. They helped build it. But because visibility once meant vulnerability, and safety sometimes meant remaining unseen. Growing up early, however, carries a hidden cost. Self-reliance becomes deeply wired. Research shows many Gen X adults seek support less often during stress, not due to lack of relationships, but because dependence feels unfamiliar. The child who solved problems alone often becomes the adult who assumes they still must. Strength becomes habit, even when sharing the weight might help. Generation X grew up between worlds: analog childhood, digital adulthood. They searched libraries instead of browsers, waited days for answers instead of seconds, fixed broken bikes with greasy hands, adjusted antennas, smacked televisions until pictures stabilized. They learned patience, trial and error, the belief that effort could eventually master reality. Now many watch younger generations grow up surrounded by supervision and constant documentation. Every milestone recorded, every mistake preserved, and sometimes they wonder whether something subtle disappeared. Because Gen X remembers solitude, discovery without witnesses, the freedom to become yourself quietly. Before the world started watching, they became the generation in between. Bridges rarely receive attention. People celebrate beginnings and endings, not the structures holding everything together. But Gen X learned early not to expect applause. The children who raise themselves rarely wait for recognition. They simply keep things working, steady, reliable, moving forward. Because long ago, in quiet houses after school, they learned something most children never had to learn so early. Life doesn't always wait until you feel ready. Sometimes you grow up first, and only much later understand why. Why independence feels natural, why competence feels comforting, why silence never felt empty, only familiar. And with time, many begin to see it differently. Those empty afternoons didn't only teach survival. They taught resilience, resourcefulness, the ability to stand steady when things fall apart. What once felt like absence quietly became strength. What looked like growing up alone was also life preparing them, slowly, patiently, for something steadier, something earned, something that years later finally feels like milk and honey for your soul.